We're going to discuss all of that and more, as well as play some of your car sounds on this edition of the show. Now, I got to talk a little bit about AE86s, and specifically because everyone I know was blowing my phone up over a recent AE86 story. But before we do that, I have to talk a little bit about my AE86, which I almost grenaded the engine on through sheer stupidity. I'm telling you, man, I have no business being around cars. So, and if you're watching on video, which you can do, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, wherever, I usually have the AE86 behind me. I'm here in the garage studio today instead of right at the radio station, and usually the AE86 is right behind me, and ironically, I'm talking about it, and it's not there, but my S2000 is back there with the K24 sitting in it, and it's there to remind me to work on it because I haven't touched it in like 2 months. So that's my penance for not working on it. It's sitting there looming over my shoulder. But what I did recently, and I've been working on the road a lot. My day job has had me traveling a lot this past month and actually the month before that. So it's been really hard to keep up on things. So I was really wanting to get the AE86 up and running so I could drive it when I get back from a work trip. I spent a good bit of time in D.C. and so the car, I should preface it by saying this. The car had a really bad oil pan leak. It developed it over time, and it just started gushing oil out of the side of the oil pan where it seals to the block on the passenger side. So I had to take the oil pan off. So I dropped that, and I'm doing this all the night before I fly out, by the way. And I'm flying out fairly early, and I'm like, I need this done so I can have something to look forward to when I get back. Because, yeah, sure, working on the road's fun. You get to see cool places. Sometimes I do this show on the road when it makes sense to do it. But I was like, I need something to look forward to. I got to drive my car when I get back. I mean, really, it brings me joy. So I'm doing this the night before I fly out. And I'm taking the oil pan off, and I'm scraping all the old sealant off of there. And I thought, well, why don't I also inspect the rod bearings? Because I have no idea. This motor, it's the motor I imported for this car. It was originally a GTS, so it had the 4AGE, the 16 valve. And that was blown up by the time I got the car. So I decided to put in the later model 20 valve motor from a like 99 or 2000 AE111. Don't quote me on those years exactly, but it's a 4AGE, but 5 valves per cylinder, individual throttle bodies, all of that stuff. And I did it cheap. I got it for like $1,500 shipped, and now they're like, I don't even want to think about what they are now. But because it makes me scared to drive it when I think about what they are now. But anyway, so I'm like, you know what? I imported this motor. I have no idea what the condition of the internals is like, and I've got the oil pan off. I might as well pop off a couple of the rod caps and look at the rod bearings and see if they're in decent shape. The 4AGE that was previously in this car when I got it from the previous owner had spun rod bearings. They were toast. That's one of the issues, and it destroyed the crank to the point where it didn't make sense to reuse the crank, and getting a new crank was actually going to cost about as much as it would have cost to just import this engine I got. So anyway, so I decided to pop these rod bearings off, and I've been beating on the car. I've been driving it on the track. I've been doing autocrosses with it. So, I mean, the rev limiter's there for a reason, and you're supposed to hit that rev limiter. It tells you when to shift, obviously. So that's how I've been driving it. And I'm like, oh gosh, the rod bearings are going to be terrible. I don't know what to expect. I pop them off, and I'm like, oh, they look great. All right, no problem. I'll put the rod bearings back on, tighten everything back down, put the oil pan on, and reseal it. And then, so this is what happened. By the way, I've got a copy of the service manual for the motor here, and I was tightening the rod bearing caps back onto the motor, and I was tightening some other things like the oil filler, the oil pickup tube, which was in inch pounds. Bear in mind, a lot of these torque values are not in foot pounds; they're in inch pounds for some of the smaller things there. So that was in inch pounds, and a couple other little things were in inch pounds. And then I get to the manual here where it says what I read at the time, and now this was late. This was like 1 a.m. the night before I'm flying out. And I read this as 22 inch pounds. And everything else was inch pounds. Everything else listed here was in inch pounds. So I had no reason to think, okay, I've still got the same torque wrench in my hand. It's this little one. I'm going to torque the rod bolts to 22 inch pounds. If you know anything, you're shaking your head right now, by the way. And if you don't know, if you're not familiar with engine internals and how this works, you should be shaking your head right now. I'll tell you, this is when you should be shaking your head, because that should have been a red flag to me. But it says here, you tighten it to the torque, and then you do an extra 90, and that's pretty normal. So I thought, okay, 22 inch-pounds, we're going to do an extra 90, and then that should be pretty snug. And it felt decently snug. And then I say, all right, those are good to go. I scrape all the old sealant off the oil pan. I clean it out. I, clean stuff up just a little bit while I'm in there, reseal it, stick it back on, let it set, and I figure, all right, well, the RTV is going to be dry by the time I get back from my trip, and I'll just throw some oil in it and go take it for a drive. And that's what I almost did, because what happened is I got back, put some oil in it after my work trip, was really excited to drive it, and I kid you not, I had my garage door open, and a gust of wind took this piece of this page of the manual I have, and blew it off my toolbox, and it landed at my feet. I don't know if this is divine intervention here, okay? Because this landed at my feet as I was getting ready to get in the car, and I just looked down at it, and I saw torque. It says, okay, first turn. I just kind of looked at it. All right, do it to 22 foot-pounds, then turn an extra 90. And I thought, oh, okay, yeah, I did. Foot-pounds. I know the entire time I had my little inch-pounds torque wrench. They're separate torque wrenches. And I thought, oh, no. Oh, no. Now, would it have been fine? I don't know, but I'm not willing to find out. And so I thought, oh, gosh, all right. This is just like that time a couple months ago now that I told you about on the show, where I got the S2000, I got the K24 in it. I got everything bolted up. The subframe pushed all the way back in. I did it by taking the subframe out. And then I realized the transmission release fork, the clutch release fork, rather, was sitting on the ground after I assembled everything, and I had to do it again. Yeah, that's exactly what happened here. I thought, oh, gosh, all right, let's take the oil pan off all the way. All right, okay, check that. And I get I retorque the bolts with the right torque wrench to 22 pound-feet, which is significantly higher than 22 inch-pounds. That's significantly higher. And then I retorque it all the way. I do the extra 90, and I have to scrape all the RTV off and do all of that over again. I'm not complaining. I'm laughing, by the way, at my own mistakes here. Don't feel like I'm just complaining about everything. And I put it back together, start it up, and all right. It's fine. I drive my car. I have some fun. But I was this close. Had this piece of paper, I'll wave it at the microphone as if my radio listeners can see it, but had this not rolled across, blown off the toolbox, a chance gust of wind, I would have started the car up with significantly less torque on those rod caps, and I probably would have gone for the first pull, the first nice, like 8,000 plus RPM hit once the motor's warmed up, and it would just exploded. It would have just absolutely puked the guts of the motor out, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, I got when they were cheap. They're not cheap anymore. So I'm glad that didn't happen. If it ever does, I'll probably put a K24 in it just to have some parts commonality with the S2000, just same parts. It just makes it simple, but I'm glad that didn't happen. Learn from my mistakes. I do stupid things so you don't have to. Oh, man. Hey, don't go anywhere. We're going to talk, speaking of AE86s, you can buy one on Alibaba now. I'll tell you about that, as well as talking a little bit about the internal combustion engine. That's all coming up here. You're listening to the Automotive ADHD Show. Don't go anywhere.